Welcome to Reddit's For Sleep, where every story is your escape into calm. If this video helps you relax or drift off tonight, gently tap that like button so we can keep making more just like this. And if you haven't already, subscribe and let us tuck you in with a fresh hour of stories every single night. Story 1. If you don't like the HOA rules, you can leave. So I did, and took half the neighborhood with me. I used to think suburban neighborhoods were peaceful. The kind of places where kids could ride their bikes down quiet streets, neighbors would wave and smile as they watered their lawns, and life just felt simple. That's why my wife and I bought our first house in a small Midwestern town. It wasn't fancy, just a 2-story colonial with pale blue shutters and a tiny fenced yard, but it felt like home. We'd moved there when our daughter was 3 and our son had just started kindergarten. We were excited to put down roots, meet other young families, and finally escape the chaos of apartment living. The homeowners association seemed harmless enough at first. They collected a small monthly fee to maintain the shared spaces, like the tiny neighborhood park and the entrance flower beds. There was even a welcome committee that dropped off a basket with cookies and a printed handbook of community guidelines. I remember flipping through it on the first night, sitting on the couch with the kids asleep upstairs and my wife curled up beside me. Some of these rules are a little strict, I said, raising an eyebrow at the section about approved exterior paint colors and holiday decoration schedules. My wife laughed. It's probably just to keep the place looking nice. At least we don't have to worry about someone parking a broken down car on the lawn. At the time, we didn't think much of it. But it didn't take long for the cracks to show. The first real interaction I had with the HOA president came 2 weeks after we moved in. His name was Carl, and he appeared at my door one Saturday morning with a clipboard in hand and a crisp white polo shirt tucked neatly into khaki shorts. "Welcome to the neighborhood," he said, offering a firm handshake. "Thanks, it's been great so far," I replied. "Glad to hear it. Just wanted to let you know we have a standard for lawn care here. Your grass is getting a little long. It's best to keep it at exactly 3 inches. I blinked. "Oh, I'll mow it today. It's just been raining all week." He smiled tightly. "We all have to do our part. Wouldn't want the neighborhood to look unkempt." At first, I brushed it off. Maybe he really did care about keeping the place nice. But over the next few months, Carl's clipboard became a regular presence in my life. We got a notice taped to our door because our trash cans sat out overnight when our daughter had a fever and I forgot to roll them back. A warning letter arrived in the mail about our son's Little Tykes basketball hoop, which Carl deemed unsightly. And when my wife's cousin visited for a long weekend and parked in our driveway, we got a formal email reminding us that overnight guest parking is not permitted outside the garage. Each time, my frustration grew, but I didn't want to rock the boat. We were the new family, and I didn't want to be the neighbor everyone whispered about. The moment that pushed me over the edge happened in late spring, on one of those warm golden evenings when the air smells like fresh-cut grass. I'd bought a small portable fire pit from the hardware store. It wasn't permanent, just a metal bowl with a mesh cover and 3 little legs. I set it up in the backyard and surprised the kids with s'mores. That evening felt perfect. The kids giggled as they roasted marshmallows, sticky fingers and chocolate-smeared cheeks glowing in the firelight. My wife leaned against me, barefoot in the grass, and for the first time in months, I felt like we'd made the right move. A week later, there was another letter in the mailbox. All outdoor fires are prohibited. Dismantle your fire pit immediately or face a $500 fine. I reread it 3 times. Surely this was a mistake. I pulled out the HOA handbook and scoured it cover to cover. There wasn't a single line about fire pits, outdoor fires, or anything even remotely related. So I called Carl. He He answered on the first ring, his tone clipped and businesslike. "Hi, Carl. It's me, John, from Maple Lane. I just got your letter about the fire pit. I don't see any rule about that in the handbook." "It's an unwritten rule," he said. "An unwritten rule?" I repeated. "Yes. We don't want to set a precedent for smoke and open flames. It could lower property values." "Carl, this is a portable fire pit. It's completely safe, and I only use it occasionally with my kids. If you don't like the rules, you're free to leave," he interrupted, his voice dripping with smug authority. My hands tightened around the phone. "All right then," I said quietly. "Thanks for your time." That night, I sat in the kitchen long after everyone had gone to bed. The only sound was the soft hum of the refrigerator. I stared at the HOA handbook spread open in front of me, Carl's words echoing in my head. "If you don't like the rules, you're free to leave." So I decided to do exactly that. As I pored over the fine print, I found something Carl clearly didn't want anyone to notice. The HOA was voluntary. When the neighborhood was first built, the developer had set up the association, but participation wasn't mandatory for future homeowners. People had been paying fees and following rules for years simply because they thought they had no choice. By midnight, I had drafted a flyer explaining, "Did you know you can opt out of the HOA? Here's how." That weekend, I went door to door. At first, I felt nervous. What if people thought I was being dramatic? But as I spoke to my neighbors, I realized I wasn't alone. A young mom teared up as she told me about being fined $50 because her kids left sidewalk chalk drawings on the driveway. An elderly couple admitted they'd stopped putting up Christmas lights after Carl berated them for using unauthorized colors. By the end of the month, over 50 families, including mine, had officially withdrawn from the HOA. Without dues for more than half the neighborhood, the HOA couldn't afford lawn maintenance, pool upkeep, or even the postage for their warning letters. Carl tried to fight it. He sent out desperate emails. He held emergency meetings in his garage. He even threatened lawsuits. But the truth was, without enough members, the HOA had no money and no legal power. Within 6 months, it dissolved entirely. The first night after it ended, I lit the fire pit in the backyard. The kids cheered when I brought out the marshmallows. The air felt lighter, freer, as neighbors gathered in backyards and on porches, talking and laughing in a way they hadn't in years. The neighborhood didn't fall into chaos like Carl predicted. It got better. Without the constant surveillance and petty fines, people relaxed. We organized block parties, shared tools, and helped each other with yard work. For the first time, it felt like we were part of a real community. Every time I lit a fire, after that, I smiled to myself, picturing Carl's precious clipboard collecting dust in the corner of his garage. Story 2. I bought back my late grandma's jewelry from the pawn shop and made my uncle regret every word. When my grandma passed away, it felt like a part of me went with her. She wasn't just family, she was the heartbeat of our entire clan. Her tiny house smelled like cinnamon and old books, and every corner held a memory, photographs, hand-stitched quilts, and her jewelry box full of delicate pieces she wore on special occasions. Before she died, she pulled me aside. "Promise me you'll take care of the jewelry," she whispered. "It's more than gold or stones. It's history, love, and strength." I promised. A few months after the funeral, I found out my uncle had pawned almost all of Grandma's jewelry. The reason? He said the family had financial troubles and needed quick cash. What he didn't say was that he spent most of that money on himself buying gadgets, going out with friends, and avoiding responsibilities. That night, I sat in my room, staring at an old photo of Grandma wearing a delicate locket. The one I remembered most, it broke something inside me. I decided then and there I'd get every piece back, no matter what. I started by visiting the pawn shop. The clerk recognized me instantly. "Looking for something special?" she asked. I nodded and handed her a list of the pieces of the locket, a pair of pearl earrings, a silver bracelet with a tiny charm shaped like a heart. She frowned, flipping through the worn ledger. "Yeah, we've had those come through recently. Came in last week." "Who pawned them?" I asked quietly. She hesitated, then said, "Your uncle." My blood ran cold. I confronted him the next day. He shrugged, pretending like it was no big deal. "Look, I did what I had to do. Family comes first, right?" But I wasn't buying it. I told him calmly, "You betrayed Grandma's trust. That jewelry wasn't just stuff, it was her legacy." He laughed, the kind of laugh that stings. "Legacy? It's just jewelry. People move on." That's when I decided to play a different game. I started working extra hours, saving every penny. I sold some old collectibles and cut back on everything. My friends noticed I was always tired but kept asking why. I just smiled and said, "It's for something important." Slowly, I bought back each piece, one by one. Every time I walked out of that pawn shop with a new item, I felt like I was healing a little, like I was piecing back the story Grandma had told me. Months passed, and I had nearly everything, except the locket. The locket was the hardest, the one Grandma wore every day, the one she said held a secret message inside. The pawn shop clerk told me the locket had been sold to a private buyer. I was crushed. But then an idea. I reached out to a local auction house, where sometimes private buyers sell things. I explained my story quietly, hoping someone might help. A week later, I got a call. The locket was going up for auction. I gathered my savings, heart pounding. The day of the auction, I sat among the crowd, listening as items went under the hammer. When it was time for the locket, I raised my paddle, hands trembling. The bidding was fierce, but I stayed firm. Finally, the hammer fell. The locket was mine. When I brought the jewelry home, I laid it all out on the dining table, the bracelet, the earrings, the locket sparkling in the afternoon light. That evening, I invited my uncle over. He looked confused, then annoyed when he saw the jewelry. "I bought this back," I said softly, every piece your selfishness tried to erase. His face flushed. "You don't have to rub it in." I smiled gently. "I'm not. I just wanted you to see what you lost. Family isn't about convenience or money. It's about respect." He stayed silent. Since then, our family has slowly started to heal. My uncle hasn't pawned anything else, and he's been quieter, more thoughtful. I don't know if he'll ever truly make amends, but the jewelry is safe, a reminder of love that even greed couldn't break. Every time I wear Grandma's locket, I feel her strength with me and a quiet satisfaction that I fought for what mattered most. Story 3. My parents keep expecting me to bail them out financially. So I set my own boundaries, and they had to learn the hard way. Growing up, my parents were my heroes. They were the kind of people who preached hard work, honesty, and planning for the future. When I was a kid, they always said, "If you want something, you work for it." Their humble beginnings were filled with sacrifices and late nights. But somehow, they managed to build a steady life that felt safe and full of promise. For a long time, I believed that their values were unshakable. But as I grew older and started making my own way in the world, I realized that things weren't as straightforward as they seemed. When I hit my late 20s and began earning a steady paycheck, my parents' behavior started to shift. It began small, a phone call about a medical bill they couldn't cover, or a text asking if I could help pay a utility bill that had unexpectedly spiked. I didn't hesitate. I wanted to help. After all, they had done everything to give me a good start, and it felt natural to step in when they needed it. At first, it felt like a good thing, even rewarding. But then the calls and texts came more often. Not just money, but requests for rides to appointments, help with yard work, picking up groceries, and watching their dog while they went on weekend trips. I was quickly becoming their go-to person. The family bank and chauffeur rolled into one. My friends began noticing the toll it was taking on me. "Man, you look exhausted," my best friend Mark said one evening as we grabbed coffee. "I am," I admitted. "It's like I never get a break anymore." "Have you talked to them about it?" he asked. I shook my head. I don't want to hurt their feelings. He sighed. "You're not doing them any favors by overextending yourself. You've got to set boundaries." I thought about that long after I left. One cold winter night, after a particularly grueling day at work, I got a text that made my chest tighten. "Can you wire us $1,000 today? We have a big, unexpected bill." I stared at the message, heart pounding. My savings were already stretched thin from covering their last few requests. Part of me wanted to say yes immediately. Another part, the exhausted part, screamed no. I called Mark, needing to hear a voice. "Dude, I don't know how much longer I can keep this up," I confessed. He listened quietly. "You're enabling them," he said finally. "It's time to put your foot down." The next time my parents called, asking for money, I took a deep breath and said, "I'm sorry, but I can't help this time." There was a long pause. Then, "We're your parents. You're supposed to help us." "I know," I replied softly, "but I need to take care of myself too." They didn't like hearing that. After that conversation, the frequency of calls and texts slowed. But the complaints began. "You don't love us anymore. You're being selfish. You don't care about family." Each accusation cut deeper than the last, but I stayed firm. I realized I needed to do more than say no. I needed to change how we communicated and rebuild respect. I invited them over for dinner one night, nervous but determined. We sat around the table, and I explained everything, how their constant demands were affecting me, how I wanted to support them, but couldn't carry their burdens alone. I told them about the stress, the anxiety, and the feeling of being trapped between love and obligation. At first, there were tears and silence, but slowly, they began to understand. They promised to take better care of their finances, and even started looking for part-time work to ease their money problems. Our relationship began to heal. They stopped calling with emergencies that weren't urgent. They learned to plan ahead. And I found space to breathe. Now, I still help when I can, but on my terms. I schedule visits so they don't overwhelm me. I don't say yes out of guilt anymore. It's not perfect. We still have tough conversations, and sometimes I hear the old complaints creeping back. But this balance, fragile as it is, feels healthier. Sometimes I look back and realize that setting boundaries wasn't just about protecting my finances or my time. It was about teaching my parents that respect has to be mutual, that love isn't measured by how much you give until you're empty, but by how you honor each other's needs. And for that, I'm quietly proud. Story 4. I've carried this secret for years, but today, I finally let it go. For as long as I can remember, I was the person who everyone leaned on, the friend who listened without judgment, the sibling who made sure no one felt alone, the partner who held everything together when life threatened to unravel. It wasn't a role I chose. It just naturally fell on me. Maybe it was because I was good at keeping calm, or maybe because I was afraid to let others see when I was breaking. Either way, I became the one people trusted with their secrets, their pain, their fears. But behind that calm exterior was a heart weighed down by a burden it could no longer carry alone. It all started in my early 20s, shortly after my parents' divorce. It wasn't a messy split, but it was painful nonetheless. My father moved across the country for work, leaving my mother to manage the household on her own. She struggled with bills, with stress, with loneliness, and somehow I felt the need to be strong for her, to make sure she didn't fall apart. So I took on 2 jobs, juggling shifts late into the night. I became the one who paid the bills, who cooked meals, who fixed the things that broke. At first I told myself I was doing what any good child would do. It was a temporary sacrifice, but as the months turned into years, the weight of responsibility began to press harder. I stopped sharing my own struggles because I didn't want to add to anyone else's burden. I learned to smile through exhaustion and pain. I became a fortress, holding everyone else up while slowly crumbling inside. The secret I carried was terrifying. I was drowning, and no one knew. No one saw the nights when I lay awake, my mind spinning with worries about money, my future, and whether I could keep this fragile balance from shattering. No one knew about the quiet tears I wiped away when I thought I was alone, afraid that if anyone found out, they'd think I was weak or selfish. I kept pretending. I convinced myself that vulnerability was a luxury I couldn't afford, that strength meant silence and endurance. But with each passing day, the cracks in my armor grew wider. One chilly Tuesday morning, I found myself sitting alone in a small coffee shop, nursing a lukewarm cup of black coffee. The usual hum of chatter and clinking dishes blurred into the background as I stared blankly at my phone screen. My chest was tight. The exhaustion wasn't just physical. It felt like a deep ache inside, a heaviness that wouldn't lift no matter how much I tried to carry on. In that moment, I realized something. I couldn't keep this up. Not anymore. I reached for my laptop and found an online forum, a place where strangers shared their deepest thoughts, fears, and confessions without fear of judgment. My fingers trembled as I typed. I'm tired. I've been carrying everyone's pain for years, but no one sees mine. I'm scared to ask for help because I don't want to be a burden. But I'm breaking. With a shaky breath, I hit submit. It felt like releasing a breath I'd held for too long, like finally opening a window to let fresh air in. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Messages flooded in from strangers who understood, who had been there, who offered kindness and words of encouragement. Some shared their own stories of silent suffering. Others simply sent virtual hugs and reminders that I wasn't alone. For the first time in a long while, I felt seen. Encouraged by their kindness, I started opening up more, first to a few close friends, then to my family, and eventually to a counselor who helped me navigate the tangled emotions I'd buried for so long. It wasn't easy. Some days, the pain felt too heavy, the memories too raw. I struggled with guilt and fear, but slowly, I learned that vulnerability was not weakness. It was a source of strength and connection. There were moments when I wanted to retreat back into silence, to hide behind the mask I'd worn for so long, but I kept reminding myself, healing starts with honesty. I began setting small boundaries. I said no when I needed to, asked for support when I felt overwhelmed, and made time for self-care, whether it was a quiet walk at the park or a long soak in the tub. I discovered that people wanted to help, but they needed me to let them in. Over time, the walls I'd built around my heart began to crumble. I surrounded myself with people who lifted me up, who reminded me I was worthy of love and rest. I learned to forgive myself for not being perfect, for needing help, for being human. The journey wasn't linear. Some days were harder than others, but every step forward was a quiet victory. Now, years later, the scars remain reminders of the battles I fought alone, but I also carry hope. Hope that by sharing my truth, I can help someone else who feels invisible or overwhelmed. Hope that strength is born from honesty, not hiding. And hope that one day I'll fully heal and find peace. If you're listening tonight and feeling weighed down by your own silent struggles, know this. It's okay to feel overwhelmed. It's okay to ask for help. And it's okay to put yourself first. You are not alone. Story 5. The small town bakery that changed my life in unexpected ways. 3 years ago, I made a decision that felt both terrifying and freeing. I left behind the chaos of the city to move to a small town nestled in the heart of the Midwest. After more than a decade of living amid endless traffic, crowded subways, and deadlines that never seemed to end, I yearned for something different. I wanted quiet. I wanted space to breathe, to think, and maybe, just maybe, to find a version of myself I hadn't seen in a long time. The town was exactly what I'd imagined. A handful of streets lined with brick storefronts, a park with towering oaks that blazed gold and red in the fall, and neighbors who waved to each other like old friends, even if they barely knew each other's names. It was a place where time seemed to slow down, where mornings arrived with bird songs and nights slipped gently into silence. One of the first places I noticed was a small bakery on Main Street. It wasn't flashy or trendy, no neon signs or artisanal branding, just a modest wooden sign hand-painted in faded white letters that read, Martha's Bakery. The windows were often fogged with the warmth inside, and every morning without fail, an elderly woman stood behind the counter, carefully arranging pastries into neat rows. Her name was Martha, and I soon learned she had owned the bakery for over 40 years. She was known in town as much for her cinnamon rolls as for her gentle spirit. On a crisp autumn morning, when the wind carried the scent of damp leaves and wood smoke, I finally stepped inside. The moment I entered, the warmth wrapped around me like a soft blanket. The aroma of fresh bread, melted butter, and sweet cinnamon filled the air. It was unlike any bakery I'd ever been in. Simple, humble, but deeply comforting. Martha looked up from behind the counter and smiled. Her eyes twinkled with a kindness that instantly put me at ease. "Good morning, dear," she said, in a voice soft with years and wisdom. "What can I get for you today?" I hesitated for a moment, then asked for a cinnamon roll and a cup of coffee. While she wrapped my order with practiced hands, we started chatting. I learned that Martha knew everyone in town, their birthdays, their favorite treats, even the small troubles they carried quietly. She listened more than she talked, and when she did speak, it was with a calmness that felt like balm. Over the following weeks, my morning visits to the bakery became a ritual. I'd stop by before heading to the local library, eager not just for the sweet pastries, but for the gentle presence Martha offered. Our conversations stretched longer. She told me stories about the town's history, how the old mill once powered much of the local economy, and how families had lived and worked there for generations. She shared glimpses of her own life, raising children, weathering storms both literal and metaphorical, and learning the quiet strength of patience. One chilly morning, with frost edging the windows, Martha confided in me about one particularly harsh winter. She'd been running the bakery alone while sick, struggling through blizzards and power outages. "There were days when I thought I wouldn't make it," she said, her voice trembling just slightly. "But I held on because of the little things, the smell of fresh bread baking, the smile of a neighbor who stopped by for coffee. Those moments gave me strength." Her words resonated deeply. I realized that despite all my efforts to find peace in this small town, Martha had found something even more profound, the ability to find joy and resilience in everyday moments. One day, as I sipped my coffee and watched the world outside the bakery window, a man walked in, carrying a small cardboard box. He looked tired, but hopeful. Martha greeted him warmly and offered him a seat while she prepared some tea. I learned that he was new to town, having recently lost his job and struggling to make ends meet. Martha treated him like family, giving him a warm meal and listening without judgment. She didn't just run a bakery. She ran a sanctuary. Watching that interaction, I understood something powerful. It wasn't just about bread or pastries. It was about connection, kindness, and community. Months passed, and as the seasons turned, so did my own life. I found myself growing roots in that little town. The anxiety and rush that had once defined me slowly melted away. I learned to slow down, to appreciate the simple things, the crunch of leaves underfoot, the way sunlight filtered through the trees, the quiet comfort of familiar faces. Martha's Bakery became more than a place to grab breakfast. It was a place where I felt seen, where I felt I belonged. One morning, after nearly a year of living there, Martha handed me a small wrapped package. Inside was a loaf of bread she had baked herself. "For your new beginning," she said with a smile. I realized then that sometimes the smallest places hold the biggest lessons. That kindness, patience, and warmth could change a life quietly, gently, like the rising of fresh bread. Tonight, as you listen to this story, remember that peace can be found in unexpected places. Sometimes it's in a warm smile from a stranger, a comforting scent, or the slow turning of seasons. And sometimes it's in the courage to slow down and let the world unfold around you in its own time. Story 6. I saw my wife with a rich stranger in Rome, and I don't know what to say. I've never been good at writing about my feelings. I'm the kind of guy who prefers to keep things simple. Work hard, come home, be there for my family. I run a regular 9-to-5 job. It's not glamorous, but it pays the bills and lets me provide a decent life for my wife, Anna, and our 2 kids. We met young, fell in love quickly, and built a life filled with small joys, weekend barbecues, late-night talks, and quiet mornings over coffee. Anna has always been beautiful, both inside and out, with a smile that lights up a room. I believed we had something real, something strong enough to weather any storm. But last month, while on a work trip to Rome, I saw something that shook me to my core, something I never expected, and I don't know how to move past it. I was there for a conference, a few meetings scattered through the day, and some dinners that I didn't really want to attend. Rome was beautiful, full of history and light, but my mind was mostly on Anna and the kids back home. One afternoon, I decided to take a walk alone. I needed to clear my head, to feel a bit of normalcy in a place so far from home. I wandered through the winding streets, past cafes and fountains, until I found myself near the Spanish Steps. That's when I saw her. Anna. She was standing beside a sleek black sports car, the kind of car I'd only ever seen in magazines. And she wasn't alone. There was a man with her, impeccably dressed, radiating confidence. He had that kind of charm that made people look twice. They talked quietly, smiling at each other in a way that felt intimate. Then he opened the door for her, and she slid in gracefully. They drove off together, laughing softly, their world glowing under the Roman sun. I stood there, frozen. My heart pounded so loud I thought someone would hear it. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, maybe a colleague from one of her recent work trips, someone she'd mentioned briefly, but a small voice inside whispered otherwise. That night, I lay awake in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling. The city lights twinkled through the window, but all I could see was Anna's smile, that radiant smile I thought was just for me. The question spun in my head. Was she being honest when she said she was busy with work? Was this some kind of secret life I didn't know about? When I finally called her, my voice felt tight and strange. "How was your trip?" I asked. She answered with warmth, but something was off. A hesitation I couldn't place. "It was fine. Just business stuff," she said quickly. "Nothing to worry about." But I could hear it, the crack in her tone, the distance in her words. I want to believe her. I want to hold on to the trust we built over the years. But I can't shake the image of her with that man, the expensive car, the laughter that didn't include me. I've spent years working late, missing birthdays and school plays, all to give my family stability and comfort. And now, I wonder if she's chasing a life that I can't give her, a life filled with luxury and freedom. I'm torn. Part of me wants to confront her, demand answers, to rip the truth out into the open. The other part wants to pretend I never saw anything, to keep the life we have, imperfect, but ours. But every time I close my eyes, that moment by the Spanish Steps replays like a ghost I can't escape. Maybe writing this down is the first step to figuring out what to do. Maybe someone else has been here, lost and confused, and can tell me how to find my way back. Because right now, I feel like I'm standing on the edge between love and doubt, between holding on and letting go. Story 7. How I finally stood up to my overbearing neighbor and found peace at last. For almost 10 years, I've lived in a quiet suburban neighborhood that many would call ideal. Tree-lined streets, friendly faces, kids playing until dusk, neighbors exchanging greetings over white picket fences. It's the kind of place that feels like a small-town bubble of comfort in a noisy world. But among the many peaceful days, there was one persistent source of stress. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Reynolds. She was in her late 60s, with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue. When she smiled, it was kind, but measured, like she was always weighing your words before deciding if you passed her unspoken test. Mrs. Reynolds wasn't just a neighbor, she was the neighborhood's unofficial watchdog. She knew every rule, every guideline, every unwritten expectation, and she made sure everyone followed them to the letter. At first, her vigilance felt like harmless enthusiasm. She'd stop by with tips on how to keep the lawn pristine or remind us about the upcoming neighborhood meeting. But over time, her attention to detail turned into something heavier. It started with the little things. The garden gnomes my wife placed on the porch, she told me they were tacky and out of place. The hedge trimming, which she said was too wild and needed taming. I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just her way of keeping busy. But soon, the comments became more personal. Your kids are too loud. Your trash cans should never be visible. Holiday decorations are excessive this year. One evening, after dinner, she knocked on our door again. This time, it was about the smoke from our backyard barbecue. She claimed it was ruining her perfect air and demanded we stop grilling. I felt something inside me break. I realized that for years I'd been swallowing my frustration to keep the peace. But peace felt like a fragile illusion when every day came with a new complaint or a passive-aggressive note slipped under the door. So I decided to do something different. I invited Mrs. Reynolds over for tea. She seemed surprised, but accepted. That afternoon, the tension in the air was thick as she stepped inside my home for the first time. We sat at my kitchen table, the same one where my family gathered every morning, and I listened as she spoke about her expectations, her concerns, and what the neighborhood meant to her. Then, I shared my own story. I told her how much our backyard meant to my family, how my kids' laughter was the soundtrack of our lives, how the barbecue was our way of making memories. I spoke about the years of juggling work and family, trying to carve out moments of joy, despite stress and exhaustion. For the first time, I saw her soften. She spoke of her late husband, a man who had taken pride in their garden with meticulous care. She admitted she felt lost since he passed, struggling to maintain control over a world that seemed to be shifting beneath her feet. That conversation marked a turning point. Mrs. Reynolds and I found common ground, not in rules or complaints, but in shared humanity. Over the following weeks, she began to ease her scrutiny. Our interactions became warmer, more genuine. She helped watch the kids when my wife was at work, and I made sure the garden gnomes stayed exactly where she preferred them. We discovered that respect and understanding were more powerful than grudges or passive aggression. This experience taught me something invaluable. Sometimes standing up isn't about confrontation. It's about opening a door, both literally and figuratively, to connection and compassion. And when you do, peace can find its way back in. Story 8. The time I helped a stranger fix her broken down car, and it changed how I see the world. A few years ago, after a particularly long and exhausting day at work, I was driving home on the winding suburban roads that thread through our small town. The sky was painted in soft shades of orange and pink as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the familiar streets I had driven countless times before. The quiet hum of my car engine and the gentle rhythm of tires against the pavement became a soothing soundtrack to my tired mind. I wasn't in any rush, no pressing deadlines, no urgent errands, just me, the road, and the quiet anticipation of being home with my family. My thoughts drifted to my wife, our 2 kids, and the dinner we would share, the laughter filling our modest kitchen, the kind of everyday moments that feel ordinary but mean everything. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I noticed a woman standing beside her car parked on the side of the road. The hood was up, and she looked frustrated, her brows furrowed in worry as she glanced from her vehicle to the road. No one else was around, just the slow evening settling over the neighborhood. Without hesitation, I pulled over a little further ahead, engaged my hazard lights, and stepped out. The cool evening air brushed against my face as I walked back toward her. She looked up as I approached, relief flickering in her eyes. "Hey, do you need some help?" I asked gently. She introduced herself as Lisa, explaining she was on her way home from a job interview, a big opportunity she'd been preparing for weeks. But suddenly, her car had started making a strange noise and just stopped. She didn't know much about cars, and now she was worried she'd miss a crucial phone call from the company. I nodded, understanding how much was riding on this moment for her. I'm no mechanic, but over the years I'd picked up a few things. Thanks mostly to my dad and countless YouTube videos that demystify the complexities of engines for regular folks like me. We popped the hood together, and I began inspecting the engine bay, careful not to disturb anything. After a few minutes, I spotted the problem. The battery terminals were loose. It was a simple fix, but enough to prevent the car from starting. I tightened the terminals, careful not to overdo it, and then turned the key. The engine sputtered, then roared back to life. Lisa let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding, a smile spreading across her face like sunshine breaking through clouds. "I can't thank you enough," she said, voice trembling slightly with relief. I was so scared I'd missed the chance. We talked for a few minutes longer about the job she was hoping to get, about her daughter waiting for her at home, and about how, sometimes, life throws unexpected challenges when you least expect it. Before I left, we exchanged numbers, just in case she needed help again. I told her to take it easy and not to stress. As I drove home, the weight of the day seemed to lift a little. Helping Lisa reminded me of the simple power of showing up for someone, even when life feels heavy. Over the following weeks, Lisa and I stayed in touch. She called me one evening to say she'd landed the job. Her voice was bright, full of hope. She thanked me again for stopping that day, saying the kindness meant more than I could imagine. We shared occasional messages, a little about life, a little about how things were going. She told me she had replaced the battery and was getting her car serviced regularly now. She even joked that I should start a roadside assistance business. That small act of kindness didn't just help Lisa. It changed how I saw the world around me. It made me realize that sometimes it's the quiet, everyday moments that carry the most meaning. The moments when we pause, look up, and decide to help, even if it's just tightening a loose battery terminal on the side of a quiet road. Those moments create ripples, reaching farther than we can ever know. Tonight, as you listen to this story, I hope you'll remember, kindness doesn't require grand gestures. It's found in the small things: a helping hand, a listening ear, a gentle word. And sometimes, that's enough to change a life. Story 9. How a forgotten library book reconnected me with my past and changed my future. A few years ago, after years of living in the city and chasing the relentless pace of adulthood, I found myself standing in the middle of the small town where I'd grown up. It was a place that felt both familiar and strange, the same brick buildings, the same tree-lined streets, but somehow quieter, slower, like the world had pressed pause while I was away. Life had been tough recently. A string of stressful events left me feeling hollow, disconnected from the person I thought I was supposed to be. I'd moved to the city with dreams and determination. But somewhere along the way, those dreams blurred, and the fast pace made me forget what really mattered. So I came back, seeking something I couldn't quite name. One rainy afternoon, restless and feeling out of place, I wandered to the old public library. It was the same building I remembered from childhood, a simple brick structure with tall windows that let in soft, diffused light. The familiar scent of aging paper and polished wood filled the air, comforting me like an old friend's embrace. Inside, the world seemed still. The gentle rustle of pages, the quiet footsteps on the carpeted floor, and the hushed whispers created a sanctuary away from the chaos outside. I began to browse the shelves, running my fingers along the spines of books I hadn't seen in years. Each one was a reminder of simpler times, afternoons spent lost in stories, dreams sparked by words on pages. As I reached for a novel I remembered loving in high school, something caught my eye. A book sticking out slightly, as if it had been forgotten or placed there in a hurry. Curious, I pulled it free. It was the same novel I'd been searching for, a story about finding yourself in unexpected places, about courage and hope. But then, as I flipped through the pages, a folded piece of paper slipped out and floated gently to the floor. I picked it up, heart pounding, and unfolded it carefully. The note was handwritten in a familiar, elegant script. It was a letter addressed to me from my grandfather. He had passed away years before I'd left town, but here was his voice, reaching out through time. His words spoke of pride in the man I was becoming, pride in the choices I'd made, even when the path was unclear. He wrote about the importance of patience and courage, reminding me that life's detours were not setbacks, but journeys leading us to where we were meant to be. The letter felt like a warm light in a dark room, and tears filled my eyes as I read each carefully chosen word. I realized then that even though I had felt lost, I was never truly alone. That letter marked a turning point. It gave me the strength to slow down and embrace my roots instead of running from them. I began volunteering at the library, helping organize reading sessions for kids and community events. Those quiet hours among books and stories became a refuge, a place where I could heal and reconnect with the parts of myself I'd left behind. Reconnecting with old friends and family soon followed. The town, with its comforting familiarity, began to feel like home again. And slowly, I found peace. Life has a way of reminding us that sometimes, the smallest moments, a forgotten book, a letter tucked away on a shelf, can hold the biggest lessons. They can guide us back to ourselves when we need it most. As you listen tonight, remember that no matter how far you wander, the roots you've planted and the love you carry will always find a way back to you. Story 10. The sympathy card that exposed my cheating boyfriend. I'm 23, living in Manchester, juggling school and working nights as a bartender. I'd been with my boyfriend for a little over a year. We weren't perfect, but I believed we had something real. He was charming, funny, and when we were together, I felt like everything made sense. One evening, while I was home alone, I found myself holding his phone. I can't explain why I did it. It wasn't suspicion, more like a vague unease I couldn't shake. I scrolled through his messages without much thought, but then I saw them. Texts from another woman. Not harmless, flirty exchanges, explicit, secretive, and detailed plans I wasn't meant to see. That moment hit me like a freight train. My heart stopped. I froze, staring at the screen, trying to process the betrayal. The words blurred as tears welled up. How long had this been going on? Why had he lied? Was any of it real? I felt the sharp sting of disbelief, followed by a slow burning anger that mixed with deep sadness. My mind raced, but my body felt numb. I thought about confronting him, immediately screaming, crying, demanding answers. But something inside me wanted to hold on to my dignity. I didn't want to lose myself in anger. I wanted him to understand the full weight of his betrayal in a way he couldn't ignore. So instead of yelling, I took screenshots, every message, every secret plan. I saved them like evidence, proof of a broken trust. Then I bought a sympathy card. One of those cards you send to someone grieving a loss. It seemed fitting, because what he'd done wasn't just cheating, it was the death of everything I thought we had. I slipped the screenshots inside the card, folded carefully so the truth was hidden in plain sight. The next day, I went to his workplace. My hands trembled, but my heart was steady. I handed the card to a coworker and told them to give it to him. I didn't say a word to him directly. I wanted the message to speak for itself. Later, I found out how he reacted. He was shocked, speechless. The card didn't scream accusations. It quietly laid bare the truth. And that silence, that undeniable proof, hit harder than any confrontation. I shared the story and video on TikTok. It blew up over 1 million views, thousands of messages flooding in. Most were supportive, especially from women who understood the pain of betrayal. Some criticized me, but their voices faded against the overwhelming support. The whole experience was painful, but it taught me something crucial. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet calm that commands the most power. If you're going through something similar, remember this. You don't need to scream to be heard. Sometimes, the quietest truth is the loudest. Hold on to your dignity. Let your strength show, even in silence. If you're still awake, thank you for spending your time with us. We'd love to have you back tomorrow night, so go ahead and subscribe. Tap, like if this video helped you unwind. And let us know in the comments what kind of stories help you fall asleep. Sleep well. See you in the next one.